Why do you keep making the same mistakes in love? Why do the same patterns repeat in your relationships, even when you change partners? Carl Jung discovered that the love you receive doesn't depend on others. It depends on what you unconsciously project. Until you understand this, you will continue attracting the same experiences over and over again. Today, we will reveal the psychological key that no one has told you about, the hidden mechanism that determines why some people love you while others walk away. Have you ever been rejected for no apparent reason? Have you felt like you give love but don't receive the same in return? If any of these questions resonate with you, stay until the end, because this knowledge will change the way you relate to yourself and others. Watch the full video and tell me in the comments. Have you ever wondered why certain people appear in your life? Why do some people seem to find love effortlessly while others struggle with relationships filled with frustration? Is it just luck, destiny, or is there something deeper at play? According to Carl Jung, our relationships are not a coincidence. What we attract reflects hidden aspects of our own psyche, even those we refuse to acknowledge. Until we understand this principle, we will remain trapped in the same emotional patterns, repeating the same mistakes over and over again. But here's the key point. The love you receive is not an external matter. It is a reflection of what you unconsciously project. The way you perceive the world shapes how you connect with others and the experiences you have in love. Today, we will uncover the hidden mechanisms that determine who enters your life, who stays, and who disappears. This is not just psychology. It's about understanding the root of your relationships on a deeper level. Stay until the end because this knowledge can completely transform the way you experience love and relationships. If this topic interests you, subscribe now and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Here, we explore the power of the mind, psychology, and love from a deep perspective. Let's begin. Relationships are neither an accident nor an unsolvable mystery. According to Carl Jung, every person who enters our life reflects something deep within our psyche, even when we are unaware of it. Our emotional connections are shaped by childhood, experiences, unconscious beliefs, and learned patterns we often don't even realize we carry. We tend to believe that love is based on compatibility or chemistry, but the truth is that our subconscious plays a far greater role in our choice of partners than we imagine. One of Jung's most powerful ideas is projection. We project onto others what we cannot see in ourselves, whether it's virtues we fail to recognize or traits we have suppressed. This is why we sometimes idealize someone to the point of believing they are perfect, when in reality, we are merely seeing a reflection of a part of ourselves in them. The same applies to people who trigger strong negative reactions in us. What bothers us most about others is often connected to something we have yet to accept within ourselves. This projection is not random. It follows a specific pattern. If we examine our past relationships, we may notice that we are consistently drawn to certain types of people or that we face the same conflicts repeatedly. This happens because the subconscious mind seeks to resolve unfinished emotional business. If someone grew up in an environment where love was conditional, they may unconsciously seek out partners who reinforce that belief, even if it causes them pain. Similarly, those who were ignored or undervalued as children might feel irresistibly attracted to people who make them feel the same way, simply because it feels familiar. Jung referred to this phenomenon as the compulsion to repeat, a subconscious attempt to recreate past situations in the hope of achieving a different outcome. However, unless we become aware of these patterns, we are likely to keep making the same mistakes. This explains why so many people find themselves in similar relationships, even if their partners appear completely different on the surface. It's not the other person that matters. It's what they represent within our psyche. To break these cycles, we must learn to observe our emotions more closely. Whenever someone evokes a strong reaction in us, whether it's love, admiration, or rejection, we should ask ourselves what part of us is being reflected in that emotion. If we feel drawn to someone extremely confident, it may be because we deeply desire to develop that same confidence. If we feel a strong aversion to someone arrogant, it might be that we fear being perceived the same way, or perhaps we secretly long to express ourselves more freely. Jung's teachings also reveal that love is not an external pursuit, but a reflection of our inner world. When we have not worked on our own emotional growth, we look for others to provide what we feel is missing. This is why so many people end up in emotionally dependent relationships, where their partner becomes their sole source of validation and security. In truth, no one can give us what we haven't learned to give ourselves. If we want genuine love, we must first heal our own wounds and learn to accept ourselves as we are. This process of self-awareness requires courage. It means acknowledging that many of our romantic decisions have not been entirely conscious, and that in many cases, we have sought in others what can only be found within ourselves. But once we take control of our emotional lives, we stop depending on external factors to feel whole. Instead of desperately searching for someone to fill our voids, we become people who can build relationships from a place of wholeness rather than need. When this happens, the kind of people we attract also changes. We stop seeking relationships that reinforce our fears and begin connecting with those who complement us in a healthy way. Instead of idealizing someone for what they represent to us, we learn to see them as they truly are. This not only improves the quality of our relationships, but also frees us from the constant anxiety of finding the right person. Because the truth is, authentic love is not about finding someone perfect. It's about building connections based on authenticity, respect, and mutual growth. Carl Jung taught us that true love does not come from outside. It arises when we have integrated all parts of ourselves. Only when we stop projecting our insecurities onto others can we experience relationships that are not a reflection of our wounds, but an expression of our inner balance. And at that moment, we realize that the love we have been searching for was never in another person. It was always within us. Human relationships are much more than random encounters or superficial connections. In reality, every interaction we have is a reflection of our inner world, a mirror showing us aspects of ourselves that we often ignore. Carl Jung believed that love and attraction are not merely emotional experiences, but are deeply rooted in the subconscious. This is where concepts such as projection, the shadow, and the integration of the self come into play. Projection is an unconscious mechanism through which we attribute to others qualities that actually belong to us. This process happens automatically and without our awareness, making us see in others what we cannot recognize in ourselves. For example, when we feel deep admiration for someone, it might be because we are seeing reflected qualities that also exist within us, but that we have not yet fully developed. Similarly, when we feel intense rejection towards someone, it may be because that person embodies a trait we have repressed and refused to accept as our own. One of the key concepts in Jung's theory is the shadow. The shadow represents all the parts of our personality that we have rejected or repressed because, at some point in our lives, we learned they were not acceptable. This could include emotions, desires, fears, or even talents that have been buried deep within our unconscious. However, the shadow does not disappear. Instead, it manifests through our relationships, forcing us to confront it repeatedly. When we fall in love, we are not just drawn to the person themselves, but to what that person represents for us. If someone attracts us, it is often because, to some extent, we project onto them a part of ourselves that we long to integrate. This is why people are often drawn to those who seem to possess qualities they feel they lack. A shy individual may feel captivated by someone outgoing because, deep down, that energy and confidence are aspects they wish to develop in themselves. Similarly, someone who has always sought stability might fall in love with a spontaneous and adventurous person, as they represent a part of their personality that has been suppressed. The problem arises when a relationship is built not on genuine connection, but on unconscious idealization. Often, initial attraction turns into frustration when the other person no longer fits the image we have constructed in our minds. We feel disappointed not because the person has changed, but because the illusion we projected onto them begins to crumble. This is when conflicts emerge. Rather than seeing the person for who they truly are, we cling to the idea we had of them. Jung also emphasized the importance of integrating our shadow in order to love authentically. This means accepting all parts of ourselves, both the qualities we consider positive and those we have rejected. When we achieve this, We stop looking for others to fill what we believe is missing in us and start relating from a place of wholeness. Love ceases to be a desperate need and becomes a conscious choice. From the perspective of Zen Buddhism, self-acceptance is the first step to experiencing genuine relationships. If we do not deeply know ourselves, we end up projecting our insecurities and unresolved expectations onto others. This is why many relationships fail. Not because love is lacking, but because they are built on the illusion that the other person will fill our emptiness. But the truth is, no one can give us what we have not learned to give ourselves. The path to healthier and more balanced relationships begins with self-awareness. Jung stated that the more conscious we become of our own shadow, the less we project onto others. This allows us to see people for who they truly are, without distortions or unrealistic expectations. Instead of searching for someone to complete us, we learn to share our lives with someone from a state of wholeness. This process is not easy, as it requires looking inward and confronting the parts of ourselves that we have avoided for years. However, once we start integrating our shadow, our relationships completely transform. We stop repeating the same patterns over and over because we no longer need others to act as mirrors for our unresolved wounds. Instead of attracting relationships based on lack, we begin creating connections rooted in authenticity and mutual respect. Ultimately, love is a reflection of the relationship we have with ourselves. If we reject or harshly judge ourselves, we will attract people who reinforce those feelings. But if we learn to accept and love ourselves, embracing both our light and our shadow, our relationships will reflect that harmony. True love is not about finding someone to complete us. It is about sharing our wholeness with another person. And only when we understand this can we experience love in its most authentic and transformative form. Love and relationships are much more than superficial connections or mere encounters of fate. In reality, every person who enters our life acts as a mirror of our inner world, reflecting aspects we often ignore or refuse to see. Carl Jung taught us that the way we connect with others is not random. It is the result of our unconscious projections and the way we have been conditioned to perceive love. From childhood, we learn what it means to love and be loved through our experiences with others. If we grew up in an environment where affection was conditional, we are likely to unconsciously seek relationships that reinforce that idea even when it causes us pain. On the other hand, if our early experiences taught us that love is synonymous with abandonment or rejection, we may feel drawn to people who make us relive that same pattern. This is why so many people, despite wanting healthy relationships, end up in toxic dynamics over and over again. The subconscious mind is drawn to repetition. Jung called this the compulsion to repeat, a phenomenon in which we attempt to resolve past situations through our present relationships. If someone never received emotional validation as a child, they may seek partners in adulthood who provide that recognition, unaware that they are trying to fill a void that can only be healed from within. This is why many relationships seem to follow the same pattern. It's not about the other person, but about what they represent to our psyche. The problem with projection is that it prevents us from seeing others as they truly are. Instead of forming relationships based on reality, we create an idealized version of the person, assigning them qualities that actually exist within us but have not yet been fully developed. This is why when the initial infatuation phase fades, we may feel disappointed. The person we once admired may begin to seem completely different, when in reality, it is our perception of them that has changed. Just as we project our unrecognized strengths onto others, we also project our fears and insecurities. If someone has a deep fear of rejection, they may interpret any distant behavior from their partner as a sign that they will be abandoned. If someone feels unworthy of love, they may attract people who reinforce that belief, whether through indifference, emotional unavailability, or a lack of commitment. In other words, our relationships tend to confirm the beliefs we carry deep within our minds. The only way to break these cycles is through self-awareness. Jung stated that the more conscious we become of our shadow, the less we project onto others. This means that instead of looking outward for what we feel is missing, Inside, we learn to integrate those aspects within ourselves. Rather than idealizing a partner as our sole source of happiness, we begin to understand that true fulfillment does not come from others. It comes from the relationship we have with ourselves. Zen Buddhism reinforces this idea, teaching that love is not an external pursuit, but a reflection of our inner state. If we are at peace with ourselves, our relationships will be an extension of that peace. But if we live in emotional scarcity, love becomes a desperate need, and we end up attracting relationships based on dependency. The key, then, is not to find the right person, but to become the person we truly want to be with. This process requires courage. It means confronting the parts of ourselves we have tried to hide, accepting our imperfections, and understanding that love is not an act of luck, but an expression of our personal evolution. When we do this, our relationships change radically. We stop feeling drawn to people who reinforce our wounds and instead begin connecting with those who reflect our growth. Rather than seeking external validation, we become individuals who are complete on our own, capable of giving and receiving love from an authentic place. The love that lasts is not the one based on need, but the one that arises from wholeness. When we understand this, we stop chasing love as if it's something we must earn or deserve. Instead, we begin to experience it as a natural extension of who we are. And it is at that moment that we discover the true secret of love. It is not found in others, but in the relationship we build with ourselves. Love is not something we find outside of ourselves. It is a reflection of what we carry within. Throughout life, we seek in others what we believe we lack, without realizing that the true path to authentic relationships begins with self-awareness. It's not about waiting for someone to complete us, but about integrating all parts of ourselves, both light and shadow, so we can love without dependence, without idealization, and without fear. Carl Jung taught us that until we bring to consciousness what remains hidden in our minds, it will continue to shape our lives without us realizing it. If we keep repeating the same patterns, if we attract the same relationships over and over again, it's because there is something within us that we have yet to face. But once we become aware of it, everything changes. The way we perceive ourselves transforms the way we experience love. The key question is, are you willing to look at yourself without filters, to stop projecting onto others what you struggle to accept in yourself? Because only when we see ourselves with honesty, without running from our own shadow, can we begin to build relationships based on truth rather than need. The deepest love is not the one we desperately search for, but the one we discover when we learn to be at peace with who we are. And it is in that moment that we stop chasing love and begin to experience it in its purest form. If this message resonated with you, let me know in the comments. What patterns have you identified in your relationships that you now see more clearly? Subscribe to continue exploring these topics together, and I'll see you in the next video.